All right, welcome back. We are MDEV1004. That's Mobile APIs and Frameworks in the summer 2023 semester at Georgian, and it's week 9, part 2 of our broadcast and recording. So where last we left off, we actually created a very, very simple user interface. And what I want to do, I want to use that interface to test out our JWT. We don't have our JWT working as of last day. We only had some security, but we did fix up some problems. Let's set that off again back into iOS, okay? So this is where we're going to do a little bit of work here on the iOS side. Okay, so here we are. I'm just going to go back into my Mac Studio. I got to say that again and again. Really happy. It was one of those things. I was like, there was a breaking point a couple weeks ago in the other course where my Mac was just like literally like chugging, right? And I couldn't take it, you know. It's bizarre, so that's why I did this. All right, so we're gonna this is nice, we've got this up, but I'm just going to minify this, and then what I wanna do is I wanna bring up Visual Studio Code. So here's my Visual Studio Code. And I want to drag and drop our, kind of our latest and greatest stuff that we did last week. So here it is. So we had all of this. I had in-class exercise 7 for last week. In-class exercise 6 from last week that I'm going to pull in here, okay? So I'm not modifying it, right? Yet, but what I really want to do with in-class exercise 6, and I want to kind of modify some stuff in a second to show you what we're going to do. We're going to actually make a second folder. I'm going to copy paste this one into a whole other one in a second. But remember what we did last time. What we had last time was we did some fixing last day. We went into our controllers and we said that, there was problems with movies, right? And what we did with it was we went through and we did some error checking, is what we said, right? Because we know that there's going to be some problems getting some issues. And I'm going to make sure, here's our try-catch. Here's the thing that we kind of did, right? We made these try-catches and everything else. We also went through, and then Robert was kind enough to help me put together an updated sanitized array thing. That's what we did last week, okay? So I want to do the same thing. I want to kind of duplicate this this project. Now we have ICE 7 already. We're going to call it ICE 7B. So we're going to just copy paste. So copy and paste, which is going to give us a copy of ICE 6 from last week, so we don't mess up ICE 6 that you guys have nicely done. And we're going to rename this. Come on. We're going to rename this ICE 7B, okay? So there's A and B. A is the one that's unnamed. B is the one we're doing for our back end. B for back end, okay? And our ICE 7B we're going to drag and drop in here now into Visual Studio Code. Again, as always, whenever we drag and drop anything into Visual Studio Code, and now, well, let's see if I set up my Mac properly. We want to go control backtick. It's going to bring up our, kind of terminal, and I want to say something like yarn install. Okay, so let's do a yarn install whenever it feels like doing it. There we go. Okay, yarn install, and it's going to add in node modules. There it is. Okay. Next, what we want to do is we want to do a TSC -W. Right, so we're going to put ourselves in watch mode so we can check to make sure that everything is transpiled. And then inside of our server, let's make sure that our configuration is using our remote URI. Okay, so make sure this is correct and it says remote. I know I had set that up last week, but in testing my new Mac, I changed it to local. So make sure it's remote, is what I'm saying. And once we have everything as a remote URI, we know a couple things. Our render.com, which is working online right now, is also inside of our live site. That we haven't changed yet. We're not changing our remote yet. Okay, we haven't done that yet. Okay, but here inside of our in-class exercise 7B, we are changing it to the remote URI. So now that once I've done that, save everything, which transpiles, and what we want to do is we want to add another terminal and just do a node mod, right? So that'll make sure that we connect. So connected to MongoDB means we're actually connected to our remote URI, which is MongoDB Atlas, okay? Wonderful. Now that we've done this, let's run that localhost 3000 here on your Mac, right? So we should see cannot get. And if I go here and do API/list, then we should be able to see not this. So why is this happening? Are you getting this too?
No.
Why am I getting it? I shouldn't get that. Let's see what it says here in my, it says cannot get 404, oh, APL, ha ha ha. Bad typing for Tom. It actually did exactly what it's supposed to do. So I'm getting my data, okay? That's coming from our remote URI. So we're getting data, this is good. So here's what I want to do. What I want to do is I want to add in security, but I only want to add in security for our adding, editing, deleting, and that kind of stuff. I don't want to add in security for reading. So you can read the movie list, you can't modify anything, right? Which makes sense. The only person that can modify something is if you have some security that's built in. So one thing that we can do to test this is to look at our local thing. Have we created a user, for our security, right? Did we? And if you look back, let's take a look back in Visual Studio Code. In our models, here's our models. We have a user.ts, and the user.ts, we talked about this last time, right, is using the user schema, and it has a username and password. And what we did was, let's just go back, and I will kick off MongoDB locally so you can see what it looks like. All right, so here is, I'm just going to use iTerm here. And MongoDB locally, the way you run it, remember we talked about this one time, is you just go sudo mongod and then -- db path is equal to /data/db. And if I did everything properly, then it should run. So that's going to run in the background. That's MongoDB as a server. And then what I can do is to test to see what we have, because remember, whatever we've done here, we've kind of done online. Then if I bring up another terminal here inside Visual Studio Code, I can just do mongosh. And with mongosh, I should be able to get in, by clearing the screen, I should be able to see what we have in our, there it is. What we have in here, if I go to show DBS, then you can see that I have my movies database. If I go use movies, there it is, I switch to movies. And if I do a show collections, then I have movies and users, right? So that's what it's like up online too, right? And if I go a db.users.find, right, you can see that it's going to show me the admin user. That's the admin user we created, right? So that's what you should have as well. So this is really good because now that we've got the admin user, this is good. Let's make sure though that there's an admin user, right, 100% on MongoDB Atlas. If it's not, we have to import this user somehow or create them with a registration, okay? So how do we check this up online? I'm going to go to MongoDB Atlas. And MongoDB Atlas is here. I'm just going to log in. Hopefully it's going to remember me. If it doesn't, I'm going to have to do some shenanigans. It did not remember me. I think I used Google. Yeah. And I need to switch to the appropriate project, which is MDEV1004. There it is. And then we want to browse collections. And in browsing collections, we see that we have movies and we have users. So up online, we have users, and there's my admin. Okay? So again, these are all the checks I'm doing to see if do we have everything in place. Otherwise, when we start coding, we're going to go, it's not working. Why is it not working? I don't know, right? Well, now we know everything is in place, and we know we can, this is where the data is coming from, and this is good. Okay, so that's the first thing. So we know we have those pieces in place. We know we have a user. We know we have all that stuff ready to go. Okay, so that's why I'm checking all this stuff out. So now I can quit. So I can do a quit. I can get out of Mongosh. And what I can also do is I can stop my little server locally because I don't need it, because I'm going to do all the work remotely. So back to here, I can just go kind of use Control C to drop out of my server, and we can close off this little background process. Wonderful. So this is all my checks that I do normally when I go through. So now that we know we have everything in place, we have some rudimentary, kind of stuff in here that we added in. So if I go back to my config, and if I go to my app.ts, we can see that I've already implemented Passport. There's Passport. Oops, let's make it so I can actually get to. Let's go back here. So we know we have Passport in here. So Passport, there's Passport local, and we need to add in a couple more things here for JWT. Okay. One thing we want to do before we continue is our package.json. Here's our package.json. It says ICE6. Let's change this to ICE7B, because that's what this thing is, so that we can put this up on GitHub in a second. And what we need to do is add in the other pieces. Okay. One thing we're going to use is a template that I've created. So if we go back out to github.com, for our Georgian College stuff, I already have a template that I've used, and I've talked about this. I created an NPM module, right? And the NPM module that I created was this Express MVC that I made for you guys. You should see that up on our Georgian College, GitHub repository. Inside of templates, I've already created an API with TypeScript, which is API TSC. Inside there, you're going to see a template for how we can do this work. So instead of us having to type this from scratch, then what I want to do is I want to get into our app configuration, so app.ts, and we can see for the most part, I'm just going to zoom in here. Let's zoom in here so you can see it a little bit easier. For the most part, it looks like ours, but I'm also using API TSC, right? Oh, sorry, it's not that one. It's API TSC with security, which is API auth TSC. That's the one I want to look at. So if I go to API auth TSC, that's inside of our GitHub repository. You're going to see that. So this is the templates, API auth TSC. I'm in the server config folder and app.ts. What we're missing is a couple things. We need Passport, which we have, and Passport local, but we also have I've also added in two modules for support of JWT, cores and Passport JWT. Okay, so those things we have to add in, and to do that, I'm going to switch back to Visual Studio Code, and let's add those modules. So how this looks is I'm just going to go here and clear the screen, and I'm going to say yarn add cores, and I also want to add passport -jwt. Okay, and I think the other one, just going to switch back before I do this, the other one that I want to add in is, if I look at this structure's package.json, this is a great way to read stuff too, is I know I've added in JSON web token, all right, which is also something we want to add in, all right? So back to this. So I want to say JSON web token, okay? And those are the three modules, cores, Passport JWT, and JSON web token that we want to use. Enter. So it's going to add this now into our modules, okay? So we can start using them. We also would like to get the dev dependencies for those modules because we want to be able to get code hinting with TypeScript. So again, I'm going to clear the screen and just do a yarn add at types, and then it's like we did before, cores at types slash passports dash JWT at types slash JSON web token, and we want to say dash dash dev for a dev dependency. Okay, and then press enter. And that's going to add in anything that makes sense. If it doesn't exist, it'll cough up and say, nope, can't do it. But this one did it. So those are the three things that I'm adding in. So again, cores, passport JWT, and JSON web token. Those are the ones. Are we good? Yep. So now that we have those modules, and those are kind of required modules for our work today, right? I want to go back into my app.ts and then add that other piece in there. Now it's a simple copy-paste operation for us because we have a template to use, right? So let's do that. So I'm going to go back into our example. I'm going to go back into my app.ts. And we're not going to do exactly everything here, but for the most part, it's going to be very similar. Okay, so I want to grab everything that it says here from cores down to the JW2 aliases here. Do you see that? So I'm going to grab all these little things here, and I'm going to copy them. Go back into our modules, just underneath where it says our passport local, and we're going to add in those things in there as well. Paste. Okay. So cores, passport JWT, and the JWT strategy that we put in, and the extract JWT. That's what we're using there. Save. Back to this. So now we did our local strategy. That's all good. The user, we did our connection to Mongo, and here I have an auth router, but we don't need an auth router because our authorization router is the same as everything else. But we can split it. Okay, so how this works when it comes to splitting it is if you look at routes on the example, then index.ts only has all the stuff that it needs for displaying the list, right? But the auth.ts, it only deals with, from a routing perspective, logging in, registering, and logging out. That's all it does, okay? So instead of me splitting things off, I'm going to leave it the way it is. All I've done here in my example is I have just two separate routers, okay? So leave it the way it is. So this is where ours is different than my example, okay? We don't need to do that. In the model, we already have our user, so the user looks identical to what we had. And the other thing that we should look at is inside of our controllers. The controllers also split off, which is nice. Here's our auth, and we have I've kind of changed this up. And we need to do this because our auth is going to be slightly different than everything else. We're going to come back to this. To enable our authentication controller properly to work, or the authentication control part, I need to add another folder called a util folder. And there's a little bit of a file that I want to use called index.ts. Okay, I don't know if you see that, Robert? Okay, so what I want to do is I want to set up that same structure. Let's do that. So back to our actual files now, and inside of our server, I'm going to right click and do a new folder. I'm going to call it util. Here's our util, and inside of our util, I'm going to add in another file called index.ts. Index.ts, there it is. And I'm just going to grab the code from here. So I'm just going to grab all this code. I think I did it, but let's see if I did it, and then paste. And there's this thing, okay? Let me go through it and talk about what this is. We talked about this last week, where we have, one thing that we're getting an error on is our session secret. Notice at the bottom there, I'm getting this error, session secret. Well, I'm getting that error because in my config db.ts, we just called ours secret. So we just have to change that util index.ts to secret, lowercase. And that should just work. So that's our modification. Okay, save. So that adds in our util index.ts. Why do we need the util? It generates the token. Remember last week we talked about that we're going to use a bearer token. And that bearer token is going to have the information that we're going to get coming inbound from the server. The server is going to generate the token. And one thing we also talked about is we cannot log off. Once we generate the token, it has that token for whatever the expiry time is. In this case, a week. It's pretty long. So we're always going to be having this token. Now, we as users have to save state on our own. So we have to say, so on the app side, we're going to save the state and say, well, we've logged out and we're going to get rid of the token. And if there's no token, then it's going to kind of get us back to our login screen, okay? Which we don't have yet. All right, so that is our token and everything else is great. Now the next part is let's modify our controller. So right now we only have one controller called the movie controller, and the movie controller has kind of does, it's double duty. It does our user and it does our movie, and we have our process registration and all that stuff that we have. Now we have to do some modifications to this, to the actual stuff here. And again, instead of splitting it off and making it a separate thing, again, this course isn't really about security necessarily, so I'm just going to keep everything in one file to make it a little easier, I hope. Back to this. So now we're inside of our controllers. I can look at our auth controller, which is part of our problem, and we can see that our auth controller uses Express and Passport in our user, and we also want to import our generate token function from our util. So I'm going to go up to the top here, and underneath user and movie, I'm also going to put in a reference to our generate token util. Okay, that's where I'm going to get the generate token function from the util folder, the index util. Basically what this is like common, this is a common function. It's a global function that I'm putting inside the util. One thing that's really great about Node.js is that you can make any function you want, any variable you want. It can just literally live in your util folder, right? So your util folder can have, right now we only have index, and this function is a global function that we can use anywhere in our code. That's how this works, okay? Which is pretty cool. All right, back to our movie.ts. So we added in a reference to the util, right? Nice. All right, so that's one change. The other change is we're authenticating locally, right? That's the process login, but let's go to the process register. When we register someone, right, everything seems to be identical. Notice that there's no changes with the registration, okay? It's exactly the same. If you take a look at this, and if I go down to process registration, it's literally the same. It's like really no difference. We're passport authenticating. Now down here, we're instantly authenticating, and we can't do that anymore, all right? So this is the part we have to remove. And the reason why we have to remove this is because we can't instantly authenticate you when you register, right? We want you to actually go through the login process and log in again, right? So please remove this part right here for our example today, all right? So we don't want to instantly log in the user anymore. Save, okay? And that means when I go back to here, all we have is it ends at the bottom here with our user register, where we have basically an if, if there's an error, then, we do the error processing. If there's no error, then we're actually going to return that the user registered successfully, which is what's happening here. Okay? Did I do that properly? Yes, so this part has to come out from under the bus, if you will. All right, so save. So that's how it's looking. So I uncommented this last part, right? Because we're no longer automatically logging in. We're just registering, and we're checking to see if there's an error. If there's no error, then we're just going to say the user registered successfully. Thank you very much. That's all we're doing. Make sense? Yes? Okay. Let's talk about the process login now. So the process login function is going to be slightly different as well. Let's go back. So back to our example. I'm going to scroll down. Here's our process logout. And let's go to our process login. So we're still it says local here, which is good, right? And then are there server errors? No problem, blah, blah, blah. And then we get to the login process, and now this is where things change. Take a look at the changes here. We need to establish a couple things. Is there a token, right? And we will have to return a res.json with all this information with the token involved. So what I want you to do is if we switch back to see what we actually have. So here's our, up here where there's no user, that's all the same. When we get to this part where it says request login, this piece needs to just be swapped out. So what I want you to do is anything that's inside the request login, just copy this whole part right here, this whole block, copy, and go back to this, and I want you to replace all of this with that block. Okay, so that's what that's going to do. All right. And the other thing that's down here is there's a last minute return at the bottom, with just in case it gets back to this, it returns. So that's what you're doing there. That's the difference. That little block right here of code is the stuff we're going to change. Let me explain this code. So again, we're logging in. If the user exists, this is good. However, if there's an error, we're going to output that error, and we're going to stop with the error. If we get by this little block right here, we're going to get to line approximately 88, where we're going to generate the authentication token by calling the generate token function we just put inside the util folder. All right, that's what's happening here. And then when we actually logged in, we're going to say we're going to return res.json success true, message the user logged in successfully, and we're going to output the user with the auth token to the console so we can confirm that this is happening properly. Okay, that's what's happening there. Process logout, for the most part, is the exact same. Why? Because it does nothing for us right now. Okay, it's exactly the same because you cannot time out a token. So that is the difference between our logging in and everything else. Let's again, what I want to do is I want to put this up on GitHub. There's a lot of stuff we just did, and I want to kind of put everything on GitHub, including our little iOS application. So let's see if we can actually make this happen. I'm going to do a git add dot, git commit -m, and we'll say added project files for ICE7, because that's what we kind of did so far. And it adds everything, including ICE7A and ICE7B. That means the iOS UI front end, as well as the ICE7B back end. All right, and then I want to say, so that's what I did, and then git push. Let's see if it actually works. Now, it says it wants to sign in to GitHub and all that kind of stuff. For me, this is the first time I'm doing it. I'm going to go open, and let's see if it's going to do it. And it looks like we're good somehow. I don't understand. Okay, it just knows who I am. I love it. Let's, Mac is brilliant. Let's, I'm really super surprised. I'm just going to go and check to see if that's true. And just going to go here to this part. And I'm going to look inside of our ICE7B, and you can see that we put it up here. Wonderful. All right, wonderful. So now that we've got this rocking and rolling, we know that we've put in this code. We haven't tested it. And we need to be able to, if I want to protect a something, right, or whatever, I can do that by adding more configuration details inside of my app.ts. Let's get back to the app.ts now. So now that we have our authentication piece, back to app.ts. So we did this JWT security. We added in our local security passport. We added in our, we did not split our routes. We kept them the same in everything else. If you scroll down, you're going to see that there's only one router. We don't have two like this, right? And then down at the bottom, now we're going to put in cores. Okay, so cores is going to be just after cookie parser. So again, I'm going to copy this part. I'm going to go back to our code, app.ts. And just underneath our express cookie parser, we're going to put in that code, which is use CORS. Okay, so that's going to make it so that we can bypass cross origin, or we can do cross origin resource sharing, which is why we put in CORS. Okay, sometimes it's important if you're running the server on the same machine. Next, now that we've done that part, we're passport initializing as normal, and we're implementing the auth strategy, which is right here. We're serializing and deserializing users, and then at the bottom after that, we have some JWT stuff we have to put in. And that is JWT options, and all the way down to use strategy. So this is where we have to kind of go from here all the way to here and copy this part. So copy, go back to our code, right underneath where it says deserialize user, we're just going to put in our code. And it should not give you a problem. Just make sure that the DB secret is not a session secret, it's just a secret, lowercase, in our case, as that's the change we made. Save. Strategy is weird because it says strategy is giving me a bit of an error. It says that cannot redeclare block scope variable strategy. Okay? Because what we did was somewhere above up here, we had strategy is passport local strategy up here, right? And just to show you this, if I go all the way to the top, right? We just have to rename this local strategy. So see here, we're on, Robert, on line 25 of the example code. It says local strategy, but our code at the top here says strategy, right? So we want to rename this to local strategy. Now the problem with this is we've already got a strategy somewhere else, right? So if we do a find, replace, and whatever, it may mess us up. But I'm just going to go and just type in local strategy here, just to make sure that we're good to go. And where we used that last time, right, where we used that is, in fact, we didn't, but we're going to come down here to our new strategy we created down here, which is JWT strategy, okay? So everything is good. We just renamed that file. And down here where we say passport use strategy, it uses our JWT strategy. That's what it does, okay? This thing here. So let me talk about what this does, okay? So JWT option, we're saying, hey, look, we want to extract the JWT from auth header as a bearer token. That's on line 72 in my case, right? And what that does is basically says, look, now that we've generated the token, I want to extract it and I want to send it to the header of our document, the header of our page, right? And then what it says is, here it says DB secret. Right, this DB secret thing is basically how we can create almost like a passphrase or something else like that that's only available to us. Now, the thing is with this DB secret, we're sharing it up on GitHub, so it's public, right? In reality, we'd probably put this inside of an environment variable. Okay, that's how we would do it. Then we're hitting up our strategy, and strategy is using JWT strategy. There we are right here. And the JWT strategy is using a payload, which we talked about before, the JWT payload. And what we're going to try and do is find the user by the payload ID. That's what we're doing here. Okay, if the user exists, then we're good. If not, then it's not good. All right, and that's what this does. That's what our strategy does. And then what we can do is we can use passport use strategy. We've configured the user strategy, and now when we say passport use strategy, we've added it in as middleware into Express. So now before we do anything else, it's going to check to see that things are logged in properly. Okay, save. Now, what if I want to protect a route? Okay. And if I scroll down here, you can see that in our example code, we have an example of how to protect a route. If I go to app use, where it says protected routes, passport authenticate, right? This actually protects everything. Right? passport authenticate, and then we're authenticating with JWT. If I put this in between the index router for API, everything is blocked, anything, even the list. Let's try it. Let's make it fail first, and let's see what happens. So I'm going to just take this little piece of code here, right, for our index router, and I'm just going to replace our index router, copy, with this one. Now this is at the global level. That means that anything you put at this level, it's the entire thing gets blocked in this case, the entire routing. So save. This means that if I go back now, let me show you. If I go back to my local host, right, if I did everything correctly, and I go back to localhost 3000 and I refresh, it should give me an unauthorized. Does it give you an unauthorized? Yes? So in order for us to authorize ourselves, we can't do it through a GET request. We have to do it through a POST request, right? And the way we're going to use Postman for this. Let's bring up Postman for a second to test this whole process out as we put these things together. All right, so how does this work? Well, what we need to do is log in. So we need to go back and use the login screen. The login screen is a POST request, right? In Postman. We're just going to use a local URI. So we're going to say http://localhost:/API/ and we want to do login. That's the thing that we need to do. That's the root. And remember, for the login, we need a username and password. The username and password is going to be, we're going to put it in the body of our form. Here's our username and password, where the username, here's the username, and the username is going to be admin, lowercase, and the password is going to be 12345, I think it is, or 123456. 123456. Okay, there it is. Now I've changed the login so we get that bearer token. That's why I changed that login for us, right? So if I did it right, and if I click send, then what it's going to do is it's going to say unauthorized. So why does it say unauthorized? Because we've even password or protected our login routes. Do you see that? Okay, let's authorize it again. So I'm showing you how we're failing first, right? So now what we're going to do is we're going to just switch back to what we had before. So undo this, change back to this, save. And now we're going to go back and just click send again. And now it's going to say true, user logged in successfully, right? This doesn't give us what we need, right? What we need is our bearer token. That's what we need. And we should output that bearer token somewhere where we can see it. Okay, let me explain. Back to this, okay? Back to this. So we go back to our app, our controller, our movie controller, right? And in our movie controller, when we log in, right, it says user successfully logged in, right? Here's our thing, but we never saved this part. Let me make sure I made a mistake. You might have got it differently, but I never saved it, of course, because this is just me being me. Save. Package.json, save. Actually, I shouldn't save that anymore because package.json has changed. Let's make sure that it says the right thing, because you know how it is, me being me. Okay, let's try that again. Send. Now we get the user, the bearer token. This is what you should get. To get the bearer token?
No, I missed the router change.
Okay, the router change, all I did was when we blocked the router in our app.ts, I changed this, I just changed it back to this, Robert, back to this. And the reason why I changed it back to show you that if I block the root, it blocks everything. Right. Because we block even registration, we block everything, okay? And now you should be able to get that bearer token. You got the bearer token?
Yeah, provides token as well.
So the token, I want you to copy that token because that's important. We're going to remember that token lasts for a week.
The whole thing?
Yeah. And that token lasts for a week. We want to grab that token, right? And I want you to copy it. And that token is what we're going to use to do things like listing and all that stuff, okay? So make sure you copy it, and let's put it in another request, okay? How do we do this? So I want to list the movies, right? But I want to list the movies with a token. So how do I send the token? I'm going to go to plus, right? And I'm going to do, again, localhost 3000, okay? http:// and then slash API/list, but this time inside of authorization. So where it says authorization tab, there is some options. One of them is a bearer token. Please type in bearer token or click on bearer token. And what you want to type in is the token. You want to control or command V and paste that token in there. That token that we just got, right? If I click send, right, it's still going to list all the movies, but now it remembers the token, okay? So there's two types that we've done. We've done a list here. Here's a list. Or we should do a list with no token, and we should do a list with a token. Okay, here's our token, right? Let's protect that route again, okay? Let's protect that route. Again, we're testing to see if this works. So again, protecting the route means that I'm just going to redo. There we go. Save. So now my route is protected again, okay? And now when my route is protected, if I just try and do a list, let's go back to here. Let's do a regular list. So if I do HTTP list, this one, without a bearer token, no authorization, if I click send, it should give me unauthorized, right? But if I go back to the other one where I put the token in there, and if I click send, it's going to give me the movie list. That's a proof that your token is working now, okay? That's the way it works. You log in, it gives you that token. That token that you have is what you need to use inside of our application, okay? So now, let's think of how this works with iOS and Android. What do we do with this token? We need to save it somehow. That token is going to be saved somewhere. Couple ways to do this. We could save it as a local storage. So locally on our machine, we can save that token. We could save it as user state, a whole other, kind of like schema that we can make. So we have our user, and then we have our maybe a session state or something else like that. And all we do is we update the session, right, to make sure that that user is logged in or not. Now the problem with that approach is that if I have multiple users, then I have to list all the users that are in the system and their state. So this user, he's logged out. That user is not logged out. So it means like if I have 10,000 users, then I would keep track of are they logged in or not on the system. That's a way of doing it. The alternative to this is you trust your client. So the client keeps track of everything. And that means that they're going to store the user somewhere locally, like in local storage, right? So that's how it can be done. If we store the user in local storage, that means on Android or iOS, that means when we log out, we can still perform the logout operation, but the logout operation is going to be something that we manually remove that user from local storage. So local storage, that user is like logged out, kind of thing. That's the way we do it, okay?
So you discard the token.
We discard the token, we've lost the token, we can't log in anymore, which is equivalent to logging off, right? Because it's gone. And I mean, the system, that it might know the token, but that token is going to be held for a week, and you probably will never find it again.
If you rerun login, they hand you
a new token.
So if you log in, it gives you a token. You log in again, it gives you a different token.
That's right. It's a beautiful thing, right? That's how it works. Now, back to testing, because we still need to test our stuff. We're not going to actually do the log in and log out process. That requires more screens. We're going to put those screens in next week, okay? Because again, we're marching towards a secure front end. We're not doing that for assignment 3. We just want you to list everything in your API, which is kind of what we've done already, right? For this week. However, what we want to do when we do some testing is back to our point right here. Okay, so this way of doing it protects the entire routing table. That's what we do here. But we can simply do something like that looks like this, right? For each individual route we want to protect, right? Or here's something else. We could split off the routes that we have, right? And we could make them the routes that we want to add to easily access will be in index, and anything else that we want to protect will be in a separate router, so that all of those routes are done. But what if I want to, I'm just going to kind of undo this, or just copy or cut this part out here. What if, I'm just going to cut it out. I want to protect, my route in a different way. So save. And if I go back to my route, the other way to do that would be for each individual route, before we get to our function, right, we protect our route. Which means, right, what we can do here is we can put that little check right in here. Now remember, going back to our app.ts, right, here we had access. If I was to undo that change, cancel. No. We want to undo this part. We have access to Passport Authenticate, which means in order for me to do blocking or security in my router, I'm going to have to include Passport up here. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So let's add it in. So I'm going to say import Passport from Passport, okay? And then let's suppose I want to block the list this way, okay? So what I want to do is go back to app.ts, and I want to grab this little code here, right? So cut it, and then go back into my route this time, here, my router, and I want to put it right inside of the list area, right here, paste. Like this, okay? And that can protect a single route. Let's see if it works. Let's see if I still get unauthorized if I go here now. Does that make sense? So here's blocking a single route. The other one blocks everything in the file, all right? Let's do that. So back to this. And if I go to back to this stuff with no bearer token, and if I click send, I should still get an unauthorized, okay? And to test that, if I took this away from here, right? So we make it fail first, and I go back to this and click send, I can see my stuff now. You can see this is with no bearer token. I get the data, right? But if I go back here and put it back in, right, and press save, and go back here where it's open again with no bearer token and click send, we're going to get an unauthorized again. This is beautiful. This allows us to protect each individual route in our API, right? That requires the bearer token. Make sense? Once we have this, we can create areas of our API that are secure, that need you to have secure login, and areas in our API that are public, okay, that anyone can use. So on that then, we could go back to our API, right? And we're going to say that our find by ID, I mean, that should be public, yeah? Right? Because, I mean, finding a movie, who cares, right? So we can say that is public. But adding a new movie, that's going to be protected. You can't add a new movie unless you're the admin, okay? And updating a new movie, well, you can't do that unless you're the admin. Okay, that's what we're talking about here. And then deleting a movie with the same thing. You can't delete a movie unless you're the admin, okay? And this is nice, this, these kind of ways of doing things. Register and log in, anyone can register and log in and log out, right? Those things should be something that anyone can do, right? So the 3 routes that we protected are add, update, and delete. They shouldn't be able to do any add, updates, and deletes, Okay? And now that we know that that's true. So here, what we've done is we've protected our, we've actually enabled JWT security for roots. Let's put this up on GitHub. Git add dot, git commit -m, we'll say protected, add, update, and delete. Git push, oh, what did I do? Oh, see? See? It says committer Tom. Your name and email address were configured automatically based on your username and host name. Please check if they are accurate. You can express this message by setting them explicitly. Run the following command. Of course I have to do that. Let me do that now. That's just me, my bad. Git config -- global. And I believe it's username and email address. This is what happens when you do a new computer. Git config global username and password. There it is. Git config -- user.name. User.name. And I believe you have to put it inside of. Okay, and then git config. That's just me. Sorry guys. That's my thing. Yep.
Didn't you do the previous one?
I did. But as I was surprised, I was like, oh, I did it. I don't know how, right? Git status. Yeah, see? And that's inside of 7. Let's go to i7. Git add dot, git commit -m. We'll say created simple iOS UI. Git push. That should be good. Let's go back into let's do a list. Nice. Okay. So that means that up online now, we're good to go. And I wanted to make sure that we're good because we protected everything. Now this is unprotected, so if I do a list, it should list everything as before, right? This is good. But if we want to do a login and register, that's a problem. Okay, so we're going to stop there for today. We've kind of created we've added in JWT. I'm going really slow here, and the reason for this is because if I do much more than this, then you're not going to be able to handle this. So what I want to do is not you. I'm saying some people may not be able to handle it, and I don't want that to be a problem. One thing more we have to do now is update our render. We didn't do that last week, and we should do that this week. So going back to GitHub, remember that we also have a MDEV live site that we want to render, right? So we want to go here, and I'm going to, for me, because I'm on a new machine, I'm going to copy this code right here. And I'm just going to minify this.
Do we want to make this as a secondary one, or do you want to overwrite the one that we already have?
I want to overwrite the one we already have, right? So what I want to do, that was a bit of a slowdown. That was a network slowdown. What I want to do is I want to go to my desktop, right? Because this is where I have all of the folders. I'm just putting them on my desktop right now. And I want to use this as the place I'm going to go. So CD space, I'm going to go to my desktop. I'm going to go to my desktop, I said. Let's just go out to, I think it's me. Here it is, desktop. And there we go. And then I want to git clone, and I'm going to put in the link that I got. Did I get the link? Did I get the link I said? There it is. Now I got the link. And I'm just going to paste that in there. There we go. And then press enter. And that's going to clone my repository to the last thing we had. And here's my live site. There it is, my live site. And what I want to do with this is I want to go back into Visual Studio Code. I'm ready to do my my shenanigans. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my live site that I just grabbed from online and put it in here. And this is the previous version of our API. Okay, we want to update our API now with the new stuff. We have our in-class exercise, and now we have our live site. Okay, and so what we're going to do with the live site is I want to grab all the stuff that's inside of our in-class exercise 7B and put it in here. All right, so again, I'm going to go in here, going to 7B. I want to select all of this stuff in here, all of it. Now notice that in here we don't have node modules, right? Because our live site doesn't require them, but I have node modules here. That's okay, because we're going to select everything except for node modules. All right, let's see if I can, okay, I did the opposite. Let's see if I can shift select. Actually, you know what, I'll just put it in there, I'll delete the node modules folder, it doesn't matter. So, so there are a couple strategies here. One, we overwrite. The other one, we delete. And I think the deletion is easier because then it's not going to ask you to overwrite everything. So we just do that one instead. Sorry. So go in here and delete everything in here, all of this stuff. So delete it all. Move to trash. Right? Not the gitignore file. We keep that gitignore file in there. And also we keep in the hidden .git folder. That's still in here. Right? And then we move over to our ISIS for today. If I can click on the right thing here. That's just my fat fingers, right? And we grab all of this, copy it, and go into the live site and paste it. That's it. So that's all the new stuff now. Okay. Now what we want to get rid of in the live site, which we don't need, is this, the node modules. One thing we also had, if you remember, is we had a problem with our version of Yarn, and we had a problem with our version of all that stuff. So in our package.json, we elected to remove Yarn altogether so that it took care of it itself. Whatever the version is that it worked on render, that's what we did on render. So save. Right? Because if you remember, and to check this, because we haven't pushed this to GitHub yet, we can check this by checking GitHub. So if I go to GitHub, and if I go to my package.json, it's exactly what we said. We took away our yarn, right? That's the main thing that we did, because that was the problem we had, okay? Back to this. So now that we have this, and if I control backtick, I can do a git add dot, git commit -m, and we'll say updated live site with JWT. And now I'm ready to push, and this is destructive because it actually accesses Render is watching our site right now, our GitHub repo. So if we change something, it's gonna trigger a rebuild on the render side. Git push. Wonderful. Now that we did this, let's go to render and check out what's going on there. So we can see the process, the whole process. So there's render.com, and it's not going to know who the heck I am. So I'm going to sign in because, of course, this computer's new, right? And here you can see that the deploy succeeded instantly somehow, right? But it succeeded before, and let's refresh. Where is our live site for MDEV? Oh, it says deploy in progress. Oh, there it is. Okay. So now we can see that the deploy is in. Yeah, the deploy is in process. It started, right? And we can watch to see what's happening. It's currently deploying. Well, building is a good thing. If it doesn't get past building, forget it. It'll give you an error right there. All right. So, and this is our last piece, my friends. And this is part. So what I want you to show in your in-class exercise 7 is show me your user interface working in iOS. That's one part. Build one for Android. That's another part, right? And then fix up JWT so that it's ready to go. I think that's enough. Like beyond that, it's going to be more than 4%, right? So you guys did a lot here. I know this doesn't seem like it's not that difficult, but
exercise or the assignment?
This is in-class exercise. The assignment is totally different. The assignment is going to be, I'm going to give you, oh, this is good. This is good. So now we should be able to do, it's live. So we should be able to do, let's go back to that render site for a second and get this one. It should do API/lists. No problem, right? But if I try and do some kind of add, update, or delete, yeah, it won't work. Okay? So that's all. We can't see it yet because we haven't tested this out, but this is where we are. For your assignment, which I'm going to give you the details today, you're going to see the details come in. Instead of you using your, the way you've done it before, yes, you're going to do the same thing. This uses our old data. My data is this for this thing. You're going to go with the in-class exercise you've been using this entire time. For your data, the stuff you're doing with your data, you're going to just take your data and apply it here to this thing. So it's just going to be slightly different than mine. You're going to have a poster link. This thing doesn't have a poster link, and all that stuff. It's really that simple. Okay? It's going to be identical to what we've done so far, and for the most part, I've done your assignment 3 for you, really, at the end of the day. Okay? There's not much to do. I will give you the details to make sure that everyone's clear, but for the most part, I've given it to you, and we're going to keep on doing it this way because by the end of semester, when you do your final test, it'll be everything that we've done the entire time. So there's no surprises. Okay? Again, for people who are following along, you're going to have no issues. For people who are not doing it and they're waiting like 2 weeks to do stuff, I don't recommend it, guys. So please, practice, practice, practice. Again, and I'll write this in here from just to finalize this process, and just so people see it when they're looking at the video, not because of anything else. I'm just going to write it here. So we're going to say in here, I'm just going to reset this thing just so you can see it. So in class exercise 7 goals for today, right? 1. And we'll make this a list, a number list. Okay, so the first goal, like we said, is build a simple UI, with iOS to fetch data from your API, the movie list. Right? That's what we're going to do. That's the first thing we do. I showed you how to do all that stuff. Your to do. Yours to do, or for you to do, we'll say, for you to do, right? Build a similar UI for Android. Okay, now I'll say ChatGPT is okay to use as a starting point. I say this because whenever we do ChatGPT, you got to make some modifications. Sometimes it doesn't quite work 100%, and you need to understand how to put together an Android application. It will help you if you say, I don't know how to put an Android application together, can you help me? It'll tell you what to do, all right? But that's what I want you to do there for Android. Next, add JWT to your API for add, update, and delete routes. I'll say make sure that'll be a general comment, not a part, because I want you to make sure that, and I'm doing this at the end. So if you're watching this video, you can see this thing. Make sure you demonstrate your testing in the video. Again, you're not going to demonstrate the add, update, delete because we don't have an update. We don't have a front end. You could do it if you wanted to with Postman. I'm not going to make you do that. I just want you to test out what we did, which is block the list. Show me how you can do the list. Show how the JW2 is working. Okay.
Yeah, because I'm finding hard to fit all that into 3 minutes now.
Right? Yeah. All right. So that's what I'm saying. So very quickly, just show me that little test, and that's it. And if it takes you a little longer than 3 minutes, it's okay. But I don't want you to. It's not meant for, hours of work. I mean, we're doing part of it in class. This is the idea here, and that's why it's called an in-class exercise. And there's another part that you need to do on your own. Okay. So the Android build might take you, if you use ChatGPT, 20 minutes, I would say. Okay. Any questions? Are you good?
Yeah.
Okay. I think we covered a lot today. Again, we think we did, just to summarize the stuff we did for those people that are watching, we covered, kind of how to build a simple user interface with iOS. I think this is a review for you, for most of you. Some of you haven't done it in a while. Not you, saying generally.
I'm 100% more familiar with the Android rather than the
There you
iOS.
go. Right. So now we know some people haven't done that in a while, and then so we're doing that. We haven't done a user interface all semester. This is our first user interface we did. So we're going to do more, and as we're going to build the entire interface: log in, register, add, update, delete, and all that stuff on the front end, so that you can do all those operations. Okay. That's it for me today, guys, and I'll see you guys next week. Okay, and I am working on the marking. I promise it'll be done by the end of the week for sure, before the drop dead dates and all that stuff. Okay, thanks, guys. Take care.